just love the game. Play like you love it. Play with passion and compete. And it shows. It shows when we watch a game, and we watch kids time and time and time again. Like, you're being evaluated over the course of the entire season. And actually over the course of 3 years, for kids that are in junior, like, if you don't get drafted when you're 17, we're drafting kids when they're 19 all the time. So don't be discouraged by it. Play because you love it, and it'll show up. And
that was Jeff Finley, former NHL player and now scout for the Winnipeg Jets. And you are listening to the Up My Hockey podcast with Jason Podolin. Just watch me now. Welcome to Up My Hockey with Jason Podolin, where we deconstruct the NHL journey, discuss what it takes to make it, and have a few laughs along the way. I'm your host, Jason Podolin, a 31st overall draft pick who played 41 NHL games, but thought he was destined for 1,000. Learn from my story and those of my guests. This is a hockey podcast about reaching your potential. Hello there, and welcome back to the Up My Hockey podcast with Jason Podolin. I am Jason Podolin, and you are listening to episode number 81 of the Up My Hockey series. And today we are talking with Jeff Finley. Jeff Finley is a 700-game NHLer. He is a Vernon minor hockey product, just like myself. He ended up going the WHL route and played with the Portland Winterhawks, where he was a 55th overall draft pick to the New York Islanders. Jeff went on to play with the Islanders. His story is interesting in and of the fact that he was a journeyman, for lack of a better word, in the pro ranks. He definitely got NHL games, but he was up and down between the NHL and the AHL. Never a guy that could really establish himself at the NHL, would live out of hotels for the better part of 5-6 seasons. Jeff became an NHL regular, finally, like a solidified regular at 29 years of age, and ended up playing until he was 36. So it took Jeff a little bit to find his game. As he says in this interview, he talks about his own personal development and his own personal kind of evolution to understand where he fit and how he could play at the NHL level. So he ended up playing for a lot of teams. He played with the Islanders, he played with the Flyers, he played with the Jets and the Coyotes, the Rangers. We talk about his experience with Chris Pronger, playing with him for 5 years, played with Wayne Gretzky, he played with Eric Lindros and Keith Tkachuk. So he was around a lot of great players. 700 games will do that. So what an amazing pro career. We definitely cover Jeff's career, but we also cover what he's doing now as a hockey dad. He has 3 boys, Max, Mason, and Jack. Jack is the oldest, who's already been drafted as a second rounder to Tampa Bay. Mason is in Calgary with the Hitmen right now, who's hoping to get drafted either this year or next. And he has his youngest son, Max, in Rink Academy, playing for Jerome McGinley in his Bantam draft here in the WHL. So he has a dad's perspective on all this as well, and what he's trying to do for his boys, and what's the best thing for him, and the decisions that he's been made. And so we talk about that in this episode. And we also talk about what Jeff's doing right now, which is scouting for the Winnipeg Jets. His day-to-day, he's an amateur scout for the Jets, so his job is to go around and to find the best 18-year-old talent in Western North America is essentially his range. And so he watches a ton of hockey, and he's trying to project talent, not only, and why I say project is because, we can go to the games and watch who's really good right now, but we're really trying to see who's going to be, what they're going to be in 5 years, in 4, 5, 6 years, when they become NHL ready. So it's an evolving science. Science is a very loose word because it's not a science, as Jeff says in this. I can look at some player and he can look at some player and we can have 2 different responses. So there's very objective is what he does, but he loves what he does. And we talk about some of the things that he looks for in players, some of the things that can separate players from the competition, and some of the methods and strategy he has when trying to uncover who these players are as people and how much that means to him when he's when he will say a name at the draft day table that he wants to root for. So really great conversation. We talked for over an hour. I promised Jeff we'd talk for an hour. It ended up being an hour and 20 minutes, as so it goes. And I'm sure we could still be on the phone right now, as there's so much to talk about with hockey. But lots of gold nuggets sprinkled throughout this interview. Really interesting. Jeff's a really well spoken man and has a lot of experience in the game. And as I said before, on all these different levels, as a player himself, as a minor league player, as a draft eligible player, as an NHL player, and then as a hockey dad now, following his kids through the process to trying to become pros themselves, and also as an NHL scout, projecting talent and observing talent. So I know you're going to enjoy this one. We'll get straight into the interview now with Jeff Finley. Welcome to the podcast. So this is episode 81, and we have Jeff Finley here, who is somebody that I ended up playing against, I think on more than one occasion. But I was joking with you the other day there, Finner, when I actually saw a VHS tape of us on the same ice in Hartford together. So we go back a ways. We've also crossed paths at some golf events, and now you're living in Kelowna, and we see each other at rinks from time to time. So, Jeff, thanks so much for joining us. I know it's going to be a great conversation.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
Yeah. So as we talked a little bit before we even got going here, is like the podcast itself, like my idea for it was, geez, there's so much that I know my parents wish they would have known or could have known, and I wish I would have known after the fact. And like that was the impetus, right? Like to talk to people who have been there, their own journeys, their challenges, their successes, and hopefully others can, learn and navigate the space a little better. And for you being a guest, one, you're an NHLer, you're as they call it, journeyman for a while till you became an established NHLer. And then now you have kids that are going through it. Now you're also an NHL scout, which is fantastic because there's so many things that we can get into there. But first, I want to talk just about you and being a WHL player and leaving home early. Like, what was your own minor kind of hockey youth experience like? Were you one of those guys that was labeled from an early age as being someone that would wear an NHL jersey, or did you have a different route?
Well, I don't know if I'd say NHL jersey. I think, growing up in Vernon, playing my minor hockey in Vernon, we had some good players, and I don't know why, because Vernon wasn't up until, the players that came before us wasn't really a hockey hotbed. But then myself, Brent Gilchrist, drafted by the Montreal Canadiens, had a great NHL career. Another guy that was a good friend of ours, that played all the way up with us, was Bruce Major, drafted by the Quebec Nordiques, had a scholarship at the University of Maine. So the three of us sort of seemed to get the ball rolling there. And after us, yourself and a whole bunch of great players younger players came after us. But I think we were good players in the province. We only played in the province. There was no academies, obviously, or anything like that back then. No spring hockey. Every second year was our second year, 10-year-old, 12-year-old, 14-year-old. We were usually at the provincials. We won the provincials when we were 12. So we had a good nucleus of players, and we were the three best players that had a chance to go somewhere in hockey. So I would say to you, yeah, we were good players back then. But to say, these guys are going to be NHLers, no, I don't think that was the case. And there was no bantam draft back then. So you just got listed by teams, and it wasn't really heavily scouted. I didn't talk to a lot of scouts.
How did that go? Because I remember it was just transitioning when I went through, right? And I think you're maybe 10 years my senior. When were you born? 67. Yeah. Okay. So I'm a 76. So yeah, my draft year, there was three of us that had been listed at that point in my draft year. So like the subsequent year was the first year where everybody eligible was available. Because I was listed at 13 years old. Were you listed at 13? Is that when you got?
No. So that was the thing. The team couldn't list you till your 15th birthday. So essentially after the end of or sometime in your second year of your Bantam season. So I got listed on my 15th birthday by Portland. And then and that was the only team. And I think if I remember correctly back then, if multiple teams wanted you, it was basically your choice. So they would all put in a claim, I guess, to list you on your birthday. Portland was the only one. And then I got a call from the Seattle scout a couple days later apologizing, say you had the wrong birthday. He liked me and would have listed me, and he missed me. But other than that, Portland was the only team that showed any interest.
Gotcha. Interesting. Yeah, because they ended up changing it then at some point to be 13, which is actually crazy because, I mean, that's young. Yeah. And then I took up 3 spots on that roster, right? So it was 3 spots on the 50-player roster, and they had to hold you for a while. And yeah, I mean, and then they changed that too because it wasn't my choice. I mean, and this isn't about me, but I mean, at that age, I was like Western Canada good, kind of, right? You know, So there was a lot of teams that put in for me, and Spokane made some arrangement with Moose Jaw, who was lowest in the standings, to take me, and then they made some backdoor deal or whatever for me to end up being with Spokane. So, and then they ended up switching that around. So, I mean, I totally remember that whole process and the listing process. Did you end up going then at 16? It looked like you did from Hockey DB. Were you a 16-year-old in Portland?
No, I wasn't. I played in, so the Kelowna Buckaroos were a long-established junior A team here in Kelowna. And the Kelowna Wings, which ended up being the Spokane Chiefs, moved into town as a Western Hockey League. I don't know if they were an expansion team or if they moved from another franchise. I think they moved somewhere, but they moved to town. The Kelowna Buckaroos then moved their franchise to Summerland. So I played the first year when I was 16 in Summerland for the Summerland Buckaroos, who had an affiliation with the Portland Winterhawks. There was 3 or 4 of us that were their property. They had a deal. I know they gave them some equipment, probably some money. We were guaranteed spots in the team, and that's where I played when I was 16.
Gotcha. So your rookie year in the Dub was your NHL draft year?
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow. How did that go for you?
It was tough. I mean, the league was tougher back then. I was a skilled, power play type offensive defenseman. So you had to learn to play harder and tougher. And we had Ken Hodge was a pretty famous coach back then. He was hard on us. So the first up until Christmas, I would say it was tough. I want to say I played most of the games, if not all of them, but I didn't play much. Yeah. There's lots of games where I wouldn't play a whole lot. And then after Christmas, I really took off, got a lot of points, was playing more, started to really establish myself, and then got on the radar for the draft after Christmas.
I mean, you had a good season considering that start. I mean, 50 points in 69 games I'm seeing here now.
I think I had 44 in the last 44.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is, so with you having that experience now and trying to figure it out in your draft year, would you be from the side of the fence if they want you at 16 to get there at 16? Or do you think there's more to it than just that?
That's a tough one. I have a lot of debates with people about that. I think, and I'll bring up my middle son who's going through it right now. He's in Calgary. He's a late birthday 17-year-old. So essentially next year's his draft year. He's in and out of the lineup. When he plays, he's on the 4th line, plays 6 minutes. He's never really been given any opportunity to move up the lineup to grab any more of a larger role. So he's kind of got pigeonholed there. It's frustrating. It's very frustrating. Would he have been better off to play junior A or midget? I don't know. Like, I see growth in his game. I see growth in his personality. He's matured. He's happy. He's loving it. So it's a tough call. If he comes back next year and all of a sudden, he's stronger, he's really skinny and weak. So that's part of his issue. But if he comes back and he's stronger and he hits the ground running and, he's in the top 6, top 9 and playing regular and having a great year, then this year was worth it. Even though it's been frustrating, hard for him, frustrating for me to watch, it's been tough. Maybe it was worth it. I don't know. It's a tough call. It really is.
Do you think, and I think that when like, because what's hard, well, one is hard because it's a bigger, stronger, faster league. So, I mean, there's physical elements to that leveling up. But it's going to be hard, I think, no matter what your age is, about everything else that's happening there, like the leaving away from home and, managing the junior route and like the way the coaches deal with you and being in a lower responsibility zone. Like, so all that's mentally challenging. Like, do you think, like, one thing I talk to parents about, and correct me or give me your opinion if it's any different, but like, a lot of times we don't look at the emotional capacity or the personality of the kid, right? Like, and I think that's a big one. Like, it's not just the hockey skills, but it's like, is he going to thrive there? Is he capable of doing that? Because you don't want to crush a kid, because there's a lot going on there outside of hockey too.
Yeah, you're 100% right. Billets, schooling, it's hard. Playing junior hockey, going to school where they're demanding of you to make sure that your grades are up. So you might get in from a long road trip and then have to get up first thing in the morning and get to school. Like, it's very hard. So I think that's all a part of it. A part of it too is to know where you're going, to know the organization, how they treat kids, how they handle kids, what you're getting yourself into. I think that is a part of it too, for sure. Calgary, in every other aspect of him, not playing all the time, has been great. He's been very happy. He's got great billets. They're on him to get his schoolwork done because it's not natural for him. So all that stuff has been very, very good. The older players on the team he loves. They treat him like gold, for a young guy. He's fit in great that way. So no issues with anything else other than he's kind of got pigeonholed into this fourth line, in and out of the lineup every other night.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I reflect on Jerome McGinley's interview that I had with him, and I mentioned it before we even started, and I didn't know the conversation was go here, but I mean, Jerome McGinley, Hall of Fame Hart Trophy finalist Jerome McGinley, when he went to Kamloops, he played like 44 games that year or something, because he was a healthy scratch, right? Like he often wouldn't play till the third period. And so we had like a similar conversation. I'm like, do you think that was the best thing for you? And he was like, as hard as it was, he's like, it was exactly what it was. It was the best thing for me, because I got to see the league. I got to be around these great players. I got to, like, even the humbleness of it, right? Like to be a part of that, so then the next year you appreciate that much more. So he said it's not for everyone. And he said there was times where I was considering, like, potentially I need to go home, but he's like, doing it and living it. Like, I think that builds that resiliency, right?
Yeah,
and that,
for sure. And you're practicing every day, you're part of the practice, and that's going to make you better. Just that part of it as well.
Yeah. It's a tough one though for parents to watch. I can imagine my boys aren't there yet, but it's like, you want, obviously you want, right? And I know the kids, they want too, but I mean, so going back to you, so you end up showing up there, and we all know it was different then. The league was tough. The coaches were tough. There wasn't much communication going on. There was a lot of figure it out ability, right? Go figure it out.
Yeah.
What was like once you got on that NHL radar? And I know even like the world was different back then too. Like you had to get the hockey news probably to even know what was going on. Did you know you were potentially going to get drafted and somewhat pretty high, or how was that?
Yeah, but again, it wasn't until after Christmas, and I didn't go into it thinking like this is my draft year. I got to have a good year. I was just excited to be on the team. And then, Brian Shaw was a pretty famous guy back then. He started to talk to me after Christmas and say, "Hey, listen, you're getting on the radar. We have some agents that are calling, wanting to represent you," stuff like that. So then it started to sink in a little bit. And they did have central scouting back then. So you were able to find out, where you sort of were ranked and stuff like that. So I started to think about it, I guess, the second half of the season, and it started to sink in a little bit, and it was getting exciting.
Gotcha. And it didn't seem to impact you because you're a point a game. I know not everything's about production all the time, but it wasn't something that got in your head at all. Like you were able to manage that pressure, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't remember a lot about it back then, but I think it was just about maybe just, it was a good organization. The Portland Winterhawks back then had just come off winning the Memorial Cup. So it was one of the top organizations in all of junior hockey. So I guess they knew what they were doing in developing players, even though it seemed like it was a little hard at the time, but I got better and, I just played.
Right. Did any draft day stories? Like did you go out and have the meetings and get flown around at all? Or what do you remember about your draft experience?
Nothing about that. I mean, Donnie Meehan was my agent. he was a young and up and comer at the time. And Brian Shaw just said, hey, this is Donnie Meehan. You don't have anybody go with Donnie Meehan. Okay, great. So, but he also had Wendell Clark. So he had a bunch of guys out of the Western League, Wendell Clark being the biggest one. And the draft was in Toronto when they took Wendell Clark that year in 85. So I was hanging around with Wendell and a bunch of other guys from the Western Hockey League. So that was pretty cool. And just to have my parents there. And, I kind of went about where I thought I was going to, or where I was ranked by Central Scouting. So, I didn't have to sit there and dread, in the later rounds, oh my God, am I going to get drafted at all? So I didn't go through that process. So it was a great experience. It was really cool. I'm really glad that my parents got to be there. And obviously, like anyone who ever makes it, they're such a big part of helping you get there. So that was pretty neat. And just being around, the excitement of, Donnie Meehan and his clients and Wendell and hanging out with all of them for the weekend was pretty neat.
You're actually Wendell preceded you on my guest list, and I had no idea that he won WHL Defenseman of the Year.
Yeah,
the year he got drafted first overall, and he showed up at camp, and on the door to the locker room, he was a left winger. Like I know I mentioned that to you. That's a remarkable story to me? Like
that's how
you saw him that year. Like what was he like as a D-man?
He was a bull. Like he just skated like he was a powerful skater and had a cannon of a slap shot. Yeah, we only played him once, I think, because the leagues weren't crossing over that much.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was dominant. He was a late birthday. So he got drafted. He was a year older than the rest of us.
Gotcha.
But yeah,
gotcha.
he was dominant as a defenseman.
That's crazy. I know.
Yeah.
So going from the draft, and then you played looks like another 2 years in Portland there. What was that transition or the first your first camp like? I mean, that's always usually a pretty interesting eye opener to show up at an NHL camp. And any stories or memories from those days?
Well, just the fact that it was the Islanders coming off of their 4 cup runs. So they were in the transition of turning the team over. But by the time I got there, a lot of them were gone. But when I was going to my first camps, they were still there. So just, Bossy, Trottier, Potvin, Gillies, Nystrom, like they were all there at my first camp. So that just being on the same ice with those guys, being around the locker room, just interacting with those guys was just surreal, really. It was incredible, intimidating to say the least.
How were those guys? Did anyone, make an impression on you or taking a little extra time or any of that?
I would say they were all fantastic, to be honest. Bobby Nystrom, just an absolutely gem of a person. A guy that would go out of his way to make you feel comfortable. My first roommate ever, this is getting it fast track in a couple of years. My first roommate ever on the road when I got called up was Brian Trottier. Outstanding person, just a great guy. So yeah, for the most part, they kind of skated at training camp. Training camp was way different back then. They skated as a group themselves with a few minor league guys that, may have had a chance to crack the lineup. And then the rest of us were divided the rest of the camp. So we weren't around them every day, all day, but the time we did interact with them, they were pretty special guys.
What was your approach then, just to the idea of being an Islander and becoming, an NHLer? You're excelling at junior. I know that the off season isn't nearly like what it was like now, like where these guys almost don't take any time off at all. But was there any, like, did they talk to you, or did you have an idea that I'm going to be a New York Islander and that was like a big goal, or like, what was your personal approach to trying to make that jump?
Well, I mean, I wish I had the knowledge that the kids have now about training. I was real skinny and weak when I turned pro. I was 6'2", 187 pounds. Didn't train properly, didn't have the proper diet and all that kind of stuff. So that was part of what took me so long to get established, was I was just really weak back in that era of how hard and physical the game was. But so I think, I just, they obviously, like I said, they were turning the team over. They wanted new, fresh blood. I was an offensive guy coming out of junior. I remember there was a big article in the New York Newsday about big skates to fill. It talked about me taking over for Dennis Potvin to run the power play. I was just like, oh my gosh, like, are you kidding me? So that was sort of the expectations that they had on me in the organization. I just wasn't ready. I don't know if I was ever even good enough to ever be running a power play in the NHL, but I wasn't ready for that. It took me time. And then I had a major knee injury in my second year pro, but up until then, I think you're just sort of, I don't know if you put as much thought into it as you just sort of take it as it comes. You go to camp, you just play hockey, right? I wish I had done more preparation and made it more of a goal, especially in my off ice stuff that I was doing back then.
Right. Just take a short break from the podcast to give a shout out to Verbero Hockey. Verbero Hockey is somebody that I've been associated with now for the past year. It is a hockey company that brings high quality products direct to teams and players. And part of the way they market their products is through people like me as being an ambassador. I have used the products now myself for over a year, and one of the products that I'm really excited about is their stick, the Mercury 350 by Verbero. This stick is phenomenal looking. It's an all black design, and it is super light and it's super responsive and it's really durable. And one of the things about Verbero is that they provide these products, these top level products that would be comparable to your top of the line CCM Bauer True Stick. You insert the blank there for the brand you want to compare it to. Yet they bring these products at a discounted price. Because you can't find these products in sports stores, you have to go to their website. You have to hear about them through people like me or other players that have used the product, and then you get these products shipped direct to your door. Because they are able to do it that way, they're able to give you price breaks on the product. So instead of paying $350 for a stick, you are paying $250 for Verbero stick, which is the same quality as the $350 stick. So as I said, I've vetted this product now. And they've come out with the youth line sticks, youth intermediate and junior line sticks. They didn't have those in the market before. They only had the senior level, which was I was using in practice. Really loved the stick, but I didn't want to talk about it until they had the junior product, and I want to see what that was all about. But my boys have used it now. I know a lot of people in my ecosystem have ordered the stick. Everyone loves the stick. So I'm an honest campaigner for it. And one of the advantages of being one of their reps is that you, and a listener of mine, is that you can get 5% off the product just by using my discount code, which is Podolin. So if you go to verbero.com or .ca, use my discount code, which is Podolin, you'll get an extra 5% off your order. One of the amazing things about Verbero is now too is if you buy 2 or 3 sticks, you get price increases. So an already discounted stick against a competitor gets to be even a greater value, up to 15-25% off if you use my discount code. So check it out, www.verbero.com or .ca. /Podolin is the discount code. I promise you're going to be happy with the stick. The stick is great. If you're looking to save money and use a top of the line product, I'm all about it. So that's my shout out for Verbero. I'm happy to be involved with them, and I'm happy to support what they got going there. I know Andy Sutton, past guest on this program, is doing great things there with Verbero, and happy to be a part of their crew. So now back to the episode with Jeff Finley. Yeah, the mental side is so important in that aspect, isn't it? Right? Like what your intention is. And that's why I asked, because, I would show up, and yes, I would, I definitely would want to earn a spot, but it wasn't like when I interviewed Tyson Nash, and you might even been at that camp, like he talked about, like he had hopped a team and he ended up at St. Louis, and he kind of felt like it was his last hurrah, sort of like he needed to make a statement. And there was just like a massive amount of conviction that he was going to get noticed, and that he was going to do what it took. And I never really showed up like with that level of, intensity.
You were a different type of player though, right?
Yeah, true.
So were you projected as a top 6 forward?
Yeah.
Because that comes with its own pressure too, right? You got to produce. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was back in the era too, like where they would call you up in that scenario. of them like having you projected to be that, but then they would give you fourth line minutes and tell you didn't produce and put you
Yeah.
back down to the minors, like where it
Yeah.
doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. But no, yeah, like for me, it was actually like Florida was a really great, like there wasn't much pressure there. It was like, third line kind of, maybe fourth line, and they'd fill you in on the PP. And that was my rookie season, and just that whole gradual kind of development. It wasn't like thrust into a top six,
Right.
and it was going
Right.
to be like everything really felt comfortable there. And then when I got traded to Toronto, that was a whole different ball of wax. Like just like the whole way they treated you, and everything was just different there. But you got to be ready to adapt, and that's the thing. That's one of the things I'm most passionate about right now is like having that mental capacity or ability or whatever word you want to use there to be able to understand what the opportunity is in front of you and be able to deal with it,
Yeah. Absolutely.
because sometimes it's not that obvious even how to deal with it,
Yeah.
like how to get your foot in the door and how to stay there.
I think the kids are better prepared now. They're surrounded by more people that are more involved with everything that's going on, so
Yeah.
I think that helps a lot. I certainly like you talk about off ice training. Well, they would send me a summer program. The Islanders would go to it, and I would find a gym somewhere in Vernon there and end up being bodybuilding type stuff. And it wasn't hockey specific, and it just wasn't, that was it though. And then you showed up and like, are you in shape? Cardio was not even a major thing back then. We skated more than anything for cardio. So yeah, it was different times for sure.
Yeah, way different. Did you have any? Well, yes, you did. I mean, you already said like as far as like that moment where you walk into a room and it's like, holy shit, these guys are guys I watched or emulated. And I said that to Wendell last time. Like in Florida, it wasn't really like that because they were a new organization and like everyone kind of was a journeyman, so there was no like real big star power there. But then like going to Toronto and like I'm on Wendell Clark's line, right? And my roommate's Ty Domi, and like it was like holy, like Clarky was one of those guys that I really emulated growing up, and I thought that he was just fantastic. So that was a whole different scenario of like, wow, like I'm one of these guys, and like getting your head around that,
Absolutely, yeah.
Did you have any of those moments yourself?
I guess my first call up, and like I said, rooming with Brian Trottier, and it's like, wow, this is pretty cool. And then just playing the games. Well, even I played exhibition games that year, so that kind of sunk in. And there wasn't as much. My parents didn't get to see it, so they couldn't get it on TV or anything. So I remember the call after to my dad, and one of the things that happened in my first exhibition game was Bobby Smith. I forget who he was playing for at the time, but the big centerman, he came across the blue line, and it was more of a freaky fluke thing than anything, but I put a shoulder into him and absolutely laid him out with a big hit. And I'll never forget that. And then making the call to my dad because he knew who Bobby Smith was and just stuff like that. And then, like I said, in my first game, played in the Buffalo Auditorium, and it's like, wow, it's pretty surreal, I guess is the word.
Did you have to answer the bell on the Bobby Smith hit?
No, I didn't. I didn't actually. No, which was a surprise back then.
Any scenarios in that with the physicality department back in that era where you had to do something that you wouldn't normally do?
Oh gosh, that stuff happened even back in junior. We had a bench clearing brawl in Portland with Prince Albert Raiders. I don't know how it was back when you were, but line brawls were common. I had a bench clearing brawl in my first year pro in Springfield. That was scary. Now you're 20 and it's grown men out there in a bench clearing brawl. And it's like, wow, this is unreal. So yeah, I had lots of scenarios like that.
Did you find, like in that scenario, did you find somebody that did someone find you, or how did that whole thing go?
It was to be honest, it was so long that one went on for so long. I had a couple different partners. I ended up fighting Mark Crawford at one point. And I don't know how, I don't know why. I watched the video of it. And I think it was sort of ingrained in us back then that even if you weren't a fighter, you had to stick up for your teammates, and especially if someone was losing. And that's how a lot of the line brawls started. Someone was getting beat up, and then all of a sudden everyone would jump in to help, and then everyone got paired off. So it was, you just sort of, you learn how to do it. Yeah, you learn how to survive anyways.
Yeah, exactly. What do you think about that now? Like with the state of even what the BCJ has done, like, I mean, one fight and you're out. It seems, well, actually, I'll say that it seems like there is a bit of an uptick in the NHL this year as far as like fighting majors is concerned, but it's I've called it pendulum seems to have swung, right? Like away from some of the physicality
Yeah.
and some of the fighting. Do you think, like, where's your stance just in general for the benefit of the game or the players that are playing it right now?
Well, I think you have to have it right for policing the game, for sure. It's funny because having boys that are coming up now, I get worried for them. And my oldest son Jack is 6'6", and one thing I always told him is I always want him to learn to be a skilled player because I didn't want him to be a big dummy. So
Yeah.
I always want him to try and learn to be skilled. But I always said, you can't let people take liberties on you as a big guy. You got to stick up for yourself. So he's been able to do that. He can handle himself. But, you just get worried that they're going to get hurt in a fight. And so it's a different perspective as a fight going on and two guys are dancing around squared off at center ice. That maybe you can eliminate that.
Yeah.
But I think, it's always going to be a part of the game. I'm for it because if you don't have it, then, guys can do whatever they want with no accountability. Right. So.
Yeah. Yeah, you use that word. That's the thing that I like the best. And this accountability even to play hard. Like that's the one thing that I liked from our era was like you needed to back up however you were going to play.
That's right. That's right.
You know?
Yeah.
Like, if you want to stand in front of the net and cross-check me in the back for 10 minutes, I want to turn around and make you accountable to that, then it's my choice to do that, right? Like now it seems like, or again, like I'm using the BCJ because I'm watching more of that. Like players can do that without the accountability. Yet no one, the part that blows my mind is that no one really plays that way with no accountability. It's like, wow, like if guys could figure that out, it's like, boy, you could stand out real quick.
Yeah, for sure. And as a scout, I can tell you, when guys do that, they do stand out, and you're excited for those kind of guys because they're harder to find now, for sure.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I noticed that just with your stat line, it took you a little while to get that first NHL goal. Do you remember that goal and where it came from?
Yeah, I was in Nassau Coliseum against San Jose against Jarmo Millis. I want to say it was the 6th or 7th goal in a 7-2 win, like a meaningless, end of the third period kind of goal. But one thing about me, I was offensive. I was more of a passer playmaker. I didn't have much of a shot. So it wasn't a threat from the blue line, that's for sure.
So walk us through that, just because I find that really compelling. Like when you became an NHL regular was like 10 years almost into your pro career, it looks like, So, and for those of you, like for those of you that are listening that, haven't done the pro circuit like that, not having that place that's home, never being told that you can go get a place, like, and you just know you're in flux. And I assume that was you just looking by the games and stuff. Like, that's a pretty tough existence, like, how was that first 10 years? And maybe walk us through it a little bit.
Well, it was hard. I remember one year up and down with the Islanders, I was in a hotel either down in Springfield or up in New York till the end of January. I never did have a place because they were kind of like, well, we're not sure if we're going to keep you. But anyways, I wasn't ready physically to be a regular in the NHL. That's how I would look back in my career. And then I had a pretty significant knee injury my second year pro that set me back too. And so I think by the time I was probably feeling comfortable, I think I played 50 some games one year for the Islanders, but they had sort of moved on from me. But I was feeling in my own personal game that I was a regular now. I was comfortable with where I was at. I was confident in my abilities to play in the league. And I think my game had evolved where now I wasn't going to be offensive, but I was smart enough to know to be reliable night in and night out defensively. I had enough skill where I could move the puck out of my zone and make a first pass. So that's kind of that's how I evolved as a player. And that's what I became from that point on. But it was after with other organizations that I became more of a regular. But I think I was with the Islanders for 6 years before that happened.
Well, that identity shift is like, I don't know, you as a scout and you probably with your sons, I assume, like for a player to figure out what they are, like what they are,
Yeah,
what they can be, of course, at a young age too, because you want to have a ceiling. I mean, where can you get to? But like
yeah,
really embracing what that is and doing it, right?
yeah,
Because a
yeah.
lot of guys are trying to be something that they're not. Like for you to make that evolution or to make that transition from somebody who was, the point guy to now you're viewing your success of your own game by how reliable you're being and consistently you're being that way. Was that something that was more of a maturity on you yourself, or was somebody there within the organization kind of helping you with that transition?
Well, I think it was more myself. I think you sort of figure out that when you're young and offensive and that's all you're thinking about is points, 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 you don't realize, getting scored on is just as important, or to not get scored on. And I always felt like I had a bit of a loaded gun to my head. As soon as I'd make a mistake and the puck was in the back of my net, my ice time or I was done for the night, and back down to the minors I would go. And so I had to learn, like, I got to take care of my own end first. And then I just sort of evolved into that. And then you realize that, and I guess through coaches talking to you, like, we like what you bring every night, just be consistent, how that's what coaches like, right? They want to know what they're getting out of each guy every night. So it's not a big swings and big roller coaster. So that's, I guess, sort of what I figured out is, okay, don't get scored on. and that's what sort of established myself from there on.
Right. Within that growth, could there have been growth now looking back? Like I mean, again, a lot of times and even at the junior level, right? You want to establish yourself as something, and then there could be some evolution, or that's just where it is. Like, could you have, once you established yourself and had that foothold, could you have maybe grown that other side of it, or that ship had sailed at that point?
No, I think you get labeled there. No, other guys, younger guys, newer guys, more skilled guys have come along and taken that spot. Yeah, I had my opportunity early. They wanted me to do it. Well, actually, I believe it was Jeff Norton that came along right after me, and Jeff Norton became their power play guy after that. So, yeah, no.
Yeah, the window's small, isn't it? Sometimes.
Yeah. And sometimes, for other guys, they may be down in the minors. They just need an opportunity, just get that chance. I was given that chance and I kind of blew it early, but I was able to get back. I mean, it took a long time. I think I played over 400 games in the American League. But it took a while. But sometimes, guys just need to get an opportunity and then they run with it.
Yeah. Yeah, when I reflect on my career, it's kind of funny because how that window, I mean, you talk about labels too, right? Like you have your prospect time, and then all of a sudden that, for whatever reason, somebody decides that door is closed. You could be 23 years old, and just because you've been in the league for a while and you're not a prospect anymore, like these, I've said before, like Jason Krog coming out of who turned out to be my teammate, his first year pro. But I mean, he was older than me coming out of university, but he was a free agent. Right. And so he signs for $1 million and he's a rookie and the shiny new penny, and I'm leading the team in points, but I'm like washed up and a year younger than him.
No, that's the way it works.
I know. Yeah. It's so funny. So, I mean, that's one thing that I really try and get players focused on now is, like, you don't know when those opportunities are going to come, and you definitely want to try and be as prepared as you can be for them, you know? And recognize that it's an opportunity, because I think, like, the player mentality, at least for me, it was like, oh, well, there'll be another chance. Like there'll be another call up or something will happen, and then all of a sudden it's not there, regardless of how well you're doing too sometimes, right?
Well, your story about Tyson Nash is a perfect example. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm pretty sure I remember that training camp. He came in and he was running around like a nut bar back then. Yeah. I think Kelly Chase or Tony Twist might have went after him at one point.
He said he wasn't allowed to come on. He said he blew up Pavel Dimitra in his first shift. He said he crushed Dimitra. Then he had to answer the bell with somebody. I forget who it was. I think it might have been Chase. Yeah. And then so he fights Chase, if I got the names right. But the best part about the whole thing was he came to the bench because, like, there was no penalty boxes or whatever, right? And the coach wouldn't let him back on. So he had to stay out after his fight. Yeah. And then he fought again in the corner with somebody else. He came in a game and he said it was just like a zoo. But he's like, he had to do
made the team. Yeah.
Yeah, he made the team.
Yeah.
Like, fantastic stuff. So I love that you said that you felt that you belonged, and you knew that you kind of like you felt like you could do that job. And that's one of the biggest things that you have to have, that personal belief to, to really do it. Is that time where you Like, was that after that trade from Philly to Winnipeg, or like when did you feel that for the first
No,
time?
I think after the year I played the 50 some games in with the Islanders, I was
Gotcha.
comfortable with where my game was at. I think maybe even before that, when you're playing in the minors and you feel like you're playing well enough that you could be called up or you should be up. I think that was part of what kept me going and not losing hope or losing faith that I felt like I was good enough to play. I just needed to get the opportunity. So, I guess, and I did. Luckily, I moved around to a couple different organizations and carved out a bit of a career.
No, you've had a great career. And Phoenix was the first stop where it looks like you didn't have any time in the minors. So, like, you had a house in Phoenix that year, like, or a place, like that was the first time.
I moved down with the organization. So I played the last year. The Jets were the Jets.
Right.
In 95, 96. And then I moved with
organization
down to Phoenix the first year they were there.
Gotcha. I just looked a little bit of the players you were with, like some huge names in the sport, Lindros and Tkachuk and Pronger and Gretzky even. You're right, Gretzky in the Rangers. They're all super interesting, but like one of the players that I wouldn't mind chatting about a bit is Chris Pronger, because Hockey Hall of Famer and Norris Trophy, and anyone from our time, the young kids don't really know, right? Because they don't do the history, but like there's a player in my mind who is like super skilled, but like really nasty and mean, right? Competitive,
legitimate. Yeah.
And you talk about that now being a scout, and that's where I want to tie that to. And you said like they're harder to find, but can you talk about like Pronger's makeup, whether it was on the ice or off the ice, and kind of what it was like to practice with him and play with him?
Well, I mean, I was there with 5.5 years with him. So, he was phenomenal. And that was the prime of his career. Like the one year he won the Norris and the Hart, and that was legitimate. He was that good. Like he was dominant. And he could play any position, like any style of play. He ran our power play, he had a bomb of a shot. He played 30 plus minutes a night. He was mean and nasty. He was so, I coached Tyler Myers here in Kelowna, and he was a big guy. And I always I had to teach him how to use his reach and his length. He didn't quite understand how much ice he could control by being 6'8" with that long stick and everything. And that's what Prongs was so great at. And he was so efficient the way he played. He was never out of position. Like you rarely saw Chris Pronger in a foot race because he was caught. And if you did, out came the long stick and he would snuff it out. So he was so efficient and so smart on where he was on the ice. Like he'd come in after a game, he'd play 30 minutes and his hair would be dry. It was just easy for him. He was so good. And he was legitimately mean. He was nasty, bit of self-preservation. Like, if you wanted to take a run at him on the forecheck, like you were coming through his stick, like his stick was up in your face. And that's just the way he played. He was really, really impressive for sure.
Yeah. You wouldn't leave a corner battle with him without an extra hack or a
whack. And he had that long, heavy stick too. Like even if he give you a tap when he was fooling around, it hurt. It was just had that extra bite to it.
Is there any lessons from him? Like, of course, like, I mean, playing that way is hard though, too. I mean, I say that to players when I'm working with them now one-on-one. I'm like, if I feel that's an element of their game that they can either expose or, grow, doing that 82 times a year is not easy, right? I mean, because you do want to be consistent with that. But like, was that part of his personality? Is there any lessons in the way he practiced or he prepared that would, that you could give to some of these players out there?
Well, he didn't practice a lot and real hard. Like he saved himself for the games for sure, I would say. Mm-hmm. And he had that wiry, lanky build too. So I think that was probably a part of why he was able to avoid major injuries, maybe, like it wasn't a big boned guy, kind of had skinny legs. He was muscly, but not, for how hard and physical and strong he was pretty wiry. But yeah, he was all about playing the games. He was ready to go come game time. Practice time was a little different.
Right. He was the Allen Iverson of hockey.
Yeah.
He had to because sometimes those guys are nasty. I remember I had a couple examples at pro. I mean, well, one and not even close to the same, obviously, player, but Greg Smith. I don't even remember him. Bird Dog.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like he was nasty on the ice during games, but you did not want to go near him in practice either. I mean, that was just the way he was, like he was, and he was always that way. He was always on, and it was just one of those ones where you knew. And I was wondering how Prongs was, because I figured that would be hard to turn on and turn off, that level.
Yeah, I didn't have to go against him like the forwards did, so they might have a different perspective of it, but I didn't think he was too bad.
Yeah.
Practice. Anyways.
What we'd be fools not to talk about Gretzky, since you had the privilege of playing with him. Like, I mean, what a special thing just in its own right. To be around him for 63 games that I see there. Like, what was that experience like? Of course, it was. I shouldn't say of course. Gretzky was always great, but at the tail end of his career, where he wasn't producing quite like how he was before. What was your experience with him, just as a person and as a player?
Well, it was like you say, it was just phenomenal just to be around him. He had this aura about him. And I kind of thought too, like, well, he was at the tail end of his career, but I want to say he put up 90 some points that year. He was still phenomenal. Like the stuff that he would do, he couldn't do it night in and night out, but he had nights where it was like, wow, it was special. I remember one night we went into Vancouver, and it was the first game that him and Mark Messier were playing against each other. Mark was in Vancouver Canuck, and there was a lot of hype about the head-to-head matchup. And I want to say Wayne had 3-2. Like, it was like old Wayne, like he was gonna, send a message, and he did, and it was phenomenal. So there was lots of games like that, and just the stuff, and just being around him every day. Like, it was hard. I felt bad for him in a lot of ways. It was hard to be Wayne Gretzky. Like, he was so famous. I remember Carolina was new in the league back then. You think, well, you go down to Carolina, down to Raleigh, who's going to know Wayne Gretzky? He got recognized everywhere, and he got bothered and hounded, and he had time for everybody. So it was relentless. We'd get off the bus, we'd pull up, to a hotel in Canada somewhere, and he was gone. He was right through the lobby, gone. He'd go hide, and someone would grab his keys for him, because it was nonstop. But pretty cool experience, to be around him, to see him, to be, to say I was his teammate at one point. But every once in a while he'd show flashes of the old in his prime Gretzky, and it was special.
Right. Yeah, well, you're right. He had 90 points. He led the Rangers in scoring that year, 23 goals.
Yeah, and I think he only played a couple of years after that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was, like, he's one of those guys. I mean, I had the privilege of playing against him in my 41 games at Madison Square Garden. So, I mean, that was super cool too, like, to be able to do that and say I was on the same ice with him. But he's one of those guys, like, if you watch him in his prime, he was doing special things. But then to me, he was like hard to figure out about how he was so successful, especially towards the tail end, because he made it look so easy. Like the assists the stuff that he would do. Like, what did you pick up from him that was just like kind of his special quality?
Just the way he thought the game, how he was one step ahead of everything that was going on the ice. Now, he didn't play like, we had a really good team. We missed the playoffs. So he kind of had his own set of rules for the way he was going to play the game. So there was a lot of cheat in his game and stuff like that. But yeah, just his passing ability, the way he saw the ice, how he was always, anticipation, like I said, one step ahead. It was what he was famous for, right? But when you see it all the time, you really could notice it.
Yeah, that's he's obviously a crazy special player. And I mean, the thing that people almost like, what he's almost known for now is just his ambassadorship, right? I mean, just what a great guy he's been for the game. And I mean, it's hard to find anybody that will have a bad story about Wayne Gretzky, like he's
absolutely. That's what I mean. Like, that was so hard for him because he didn't want to say no to anybody. And so it was hounded relentless. Like, I remember, where we used to get changed every morning when we come to practice. He had a big table in front of his stall every day that was laid out with stuff for him to sign. So that was the first thing he did when he got to the rink every morning, was sign this table full of stuff every day. Like, it was nonstop for him.
Right. Yeah, every day of his life. That's
crazy.
The other guy was Lindros. Anything about Lindros? I had him. So my first game ever, Finner, which is kind of for the Leafs, flew in from the minors. Leafs were hosting the Flyers, and for whatever reason, my line, which was like Kyprios and Brendan Convery, we were matched up against Lindros and the Legion of Doom. So I was like, Leclerc and Renberg, and he ended up getting 4 goals, I think, later that day or whatever. Like it was not pretty. And what a beast he was. Like, what was that? Like, you saw him in his prime too, correct?
Well, I think he was still only 19, so he was just getting going. But I want to say 6'5", 245. Like, he was built like a football player, really. He was chiseled. He looked like a middle linebacker. So, that was when, I guess, guys weren't as big and training was just starting to become a part of it. But he was way ahead of everybody just with his size and physical specimen. I remember the year at training camp, we did sort of a test. It was a bit of a conditioning test, but part of it was to judge your speed. So you did 3 laps as fast as you could. You recovered, and then you did 3 laps the other way, and they measured your drop off to see, if you could maintain the same pace. Well, he led the camp with the fastest 3 laps. Like, he was 245 pounds and the fastest player on our team. Like, he was an absolute beast, like you said. And he got in some fights that year with some of the toughest guys in the league. I think he could have been a legitimate heavyweight, maybe the toughest guy in the league if he wanted to be, if he was, just that player. Like, that's how tough he was. And he'd just go through people. And he had a mean streak too, if you wanted to, go that way with him, then he didn't back down, and he'd take runs at guys. And he was
special. Too bad he was so big and powerful, because that's really kind of what ended it for him, right? Like his style.
Kind of his demise, the way he played. Probably you can imagine him as a youngster going through people, right? And didn't learn how to, skate with his head up, I guess.
Well, and everyone's head's different, right? Like, that's what's so crazy too. I don't think Ty Domi, you could ever knock him out.
Oh, no kidding.
You know what I mean? Like, there's just some guys like that, right? Yeah. Like, and maybe that was just like Lindros's, was his soft spot was his head, right? I mean, there's nothing you can do about that, and you can't even train it. But but
I just think, looking back at the hits that he took, he was skating with his head down with the puck on his stick.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Which is probably an old habit that he was just able to do when he was younger, because he was just so much bigger and more powerful.
Yeah, that's a great point. Just want to take a short break to talk about the Peak Potential Hockey Project. If you are a player out there that really wants to make the most of your ability, of your potential, if you want to uncover every rock and every stone, and if you want to give yourself a competitive advantage on the competition, this is something that you will absolutely love. I haven't seen anything like it anywhere else. It's going to teach you how to build confidence. It's going to teach you how to manage adversity. It's going to teach you growth mindset for hockey players, how to make the most of your development time, how to become a pro, the things you need to focus on to become a pro, how to analyze your game and self-assess, not only in the moment, but also post-competition. It's going to prepare you for competition, how to recognize your emotional state, and how to create the emotional state required for you to play your best. There's so much covered over the 4 weeks. It is an absolute treasure trove of valuable nuggets that no one is talking about anywhere. So players, I can walk you through this program. In the guided portion of the program, you can take the program 3 different ways. One is a guided. That's where you're going to have accountability with me. There's going to be a coaching call every 4 weeks. After every week, which there is a theme involved in that week, we will cover that on a coaching call. You get on a call with me. I make sure you're applying it and using the information to the best of your ability. There's also a solo mission. You can get the program, the 4-week program, as a solo mission. You don't have access to me. There's no interaction, but you do have all the content. You do get every lesson. You take it as you want, as you see fit, and you have access to that program for 6 months. Or there is also the mentored mission, and that is a one-on-one scenario where I walk you through the course on a very personal level. We do every assignment. I review the assignments. We make sure you're applying it and using it, and really building your toolbox of skills that you need. Most players only focus on their shot and their edge work and their skating and all these physical skills that are required to be a good hockey player. What we aren't actively building, is our mindset skills and our mental fitness for how to use our physical abilities in all moments, when the stage is the biggest and the lights are the brightest, or when it's the darkest of moments and when things aren't going well. And how do we show up and stay true to our goals and stay true to our dreams? How do we build our personal our personal repertoire of traits. How do we build our commitment? How do we build our passion? How do we build our competitive spirit? These are all things that we talk about in the course that really arm you with the best chance of reaching your peak potential, which, if you're a player with big dreams, you are going to want to extract as much out of your journey as you can and out of your inherent skill set as you can along the way to potentially a pro career or a D1 scholarship. So really proud of the over 100 players that have now taken the course and the results and the testimonials. It's so long, and it's something that I'm really humbled by. It's also something that I'm very grateful for, and it's something that gets me even more passionate to be on a platform like this and to be able to promote it, because I know that players need this, and I really encourage you to get involved in it. In one of the 3 ways that I discussed already, get on board. You should have done it yesterday. You should have done it last week. You should have done it last year. This is something that's going to help you, and you're going to be able to use it not only in hockey but in your life. These are life skills as well as hockey skills, and the breakthroughs that players make in this, and the developmental strides that they make is really powerful. So again, if you want to check that out, www.upmyhockey.com. It is the Peak Potential Hockey Project, and I hope to see you enrolled and see your name there, and I look forward to working with you. Now back to the episode with Jeff Finley. So now, as a hockey dad, you got the 3 boys, Jack, Mason, and Max. Jack was a high pick to Tampa, and Mason, is it his draft year this year?
Next year.
Next year's his draft year.
Yeah.
And then you got Max coming along here, is going to be a high pick in the Bantam draft. How has that been now, transitioning from doing your pro thing and now trying to support your own boys on their journey? Is it getting mucky for you at all, or has it been pretty smooth?
Well, I think I would say it was maybe muckier when they were younger, like you're trying to, I don't know how it is there for you, but here it was always kind of, you're trying to align yourself with good people. I with the scouting, I was away a lot, so I couldn't coach them as the head coach, all of them. I helped out as much as I could. So trying to, make sure they're coached by good people that have the same philosophies that I sort of had as, development. And I'd say it's more fun just watching them, trying to help them, give them advice, I'll give them a few tips on some shifts or some things that I think they could do differently in their games and stuff. It's a little nerve wracking at times, you want the best for them. Jack, he's got cut a couple times from Hockey Canada, the Helenka team, and then most recently got cut from the World Junior team. So that was hard, watching him go through those struggles. But getting drafted was phenomenal, like just an incredible experience. So happy for him, and his fulfilling his dream and watching that growth and everything. So it's been exciting. It's been hard at times for sure. They're all different. You got to handle them. It's like coaching, you got to handle each guy a little bit differently and how you push the different buttons and stuff. But, they're all different players in their own right. And it's been fun, and it's just been fun being a hockey dad for sure.
When it comes to that development aspect, and you were talking about coaching, like if you were, I guess the one you still like, Max, you had a choice this year. At a certain point, you don't have a choice, right? The coach is the coach. With Max, you were able to decide to go to Rink, which is one of the local academies here, and Jerome McGinley is his coach, and you could have put him probably wherever you wanted to. With the minor hockey, even previous to that, do you think that's the most important influence or the most important factor for parents to try and navigate and try and get going for their kids?
Well, it's a hard decision, right? Because it's a huge commitment financially. So, we went through it with Jack. I think, he played his first year Bantam, Jack did, and he was on the AAA team. And then he started to, I was at games and I started to run into some scouts and they liked him. They were excited for him next year. So then I started to realize, okay, well, it looks like he's on the radar. He's probably going to get drafted. So that helped in the decision to get him to an academy. Max was kind of the same way. He was, he's always been a pretty good player. He played, last year wasn't much of a season for anybody, obviously. Got the call from rink, and Jerome was the coach, and so then that's exciting. That's a bit of a no-brainer. And then Mason was a totally different. He broke his collarbone twice in his 14-year-old year. When the season started, there wasn't an option to go to an academy. He didn't start playing until November, so it was totally different. And he only ended up playing 8 games that year. So it's a hard decision. You have to be ready for it for sure. It's grueling and demanding on them. It's not once a week up at 6 in the morning for practice. It's every day. So it's tiring. It's physical. It's on the ice 5 days a week. But if you're committed to it and you think there's upside there as a player and you want it's definitely worth it. We've had nothing but great experiences with the academies.
Right. Is it the what is the biggest benefit just as I guess for the I think a lot of parents like that draft year, right? Like, and for the players too, right? I mean, they want, that's a big year for them just from, getting their name on the board kind of, right? And where they fit and all that stuff. And I know that the academy system out here is highly scouted. Is that part of the decision? Like, were you kind of chasing that for them to give them the best opportunity to go as high as they could?
Yeah, you are. I think so. And I think you got to look at it. I'm a big believer in development, right? So if you stay behind and you play for your local minor hockey team, you're not getting the amount of ice time. You're not getting the caliber of play that you're playing with and the guys that you're playing against. So you're playing with and against the best players, ton of ice time, off ice commitment as well. There's training in the gym and stuff like that. So there you start to begin to learn about that as part of it. So I think, it's if you have aspirations of moving on in hockey, then it's something that as difficult as it is financially, it's your best option for sure.
Right. Which brings, so there's a tough next question, right? And maybe not necessarily at you, but like the problem with hockey being expensive, right? Like just in general, it's an inherently expensive sport.
Yeah.
The NHL is trying to do a great job of making it inclusive and diverse and all these other things that they're trying to promote. But at the end of the day, there's still a check that needs to be written. And like the one thing for me with the academies is that, like you said, I mean, it's a big financial commitment that a lot of families can't make. Like they just generally can't make it. If you're one of those families, like I try and trumpet that. You can develop and you will get found if you just kind of do the right things. Like, is there a silver lining there, or is there a solution to try and make this more accessible to more people?
That's a tough question, and I don't know. And I think you're right. I mean, you can stay back and be the big fish in a small pond in your minor hockey organization for sure. Those guys are still getting scouted for sure. Teams that are doing their job properly are seeing everybody. They're leaving no stone unturned. So I guess the biggest thing for me is, do you get left behind in your development if you stay there and you don't get the amount of ice time, you don't play in the best league and against the best players? So that's kind of where I was at with that whole decision. And I think that's a big part of, I've seen it with my boys. They've really improved, and I've been fortunate to be in great academies. Both had really good coaches, and the growth in their game from September to now has been huge. So yeah, that's a big thing. Can you still develop at the same rate, staying back and playing minor hockey as you would if you were at an academy? That's the
thing.
Debate, really.
Everyone's different too, I guess. I mean, not every, you said it yourself, right? I mean, there's a huge demand there, and these kids are young, a lot of them making that decision. And sometimes it's not them making the decision, it's the parents, and they're really not quite frankly ready for it, or don't even like the game as much as they need to do that.
For sure,
right?
For sure.
So I think that there is some qualifications that need to be made there. But just on my own personal soapbox, like that's where I think BC Hockey and Hockey Canada in general is like missing where the game is going. Like they're still operating in like from 20 years ago. Whereas, the game's evolved and people want more. So at the higher levels of like, whether it's AAA, major bantam, or whether it's, even at our level that I just coached this year, like U13, there should be another option, like as far as another practice.
Stay back in minor hockey.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like,
I agree. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
to allow players to stay, because I still love the idea that hockey's community based. Like, I like that idea. I like the
Yeah.
grassroots of that. You know, I like people staying at home and being with their families. Like, all that sounds good to me, but hockey's got to catch up to allow that to happen. You know, meaning
Yeah.
BC hockey, like
Yeah.
Hockey Canada, like grow the programs, like give people what they want, so they're not really forced into the decision of, you know, the 25 grand decision, you know,
Yeah.
like.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's a whole nother discussion. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's tough because I'm going through it right now too, right? I mean, Hudson, my oldest, is just finishing his last year of Pee Wee here. He's a good little player. Thinks he wants to be a hockey player. It's like, now what? You know, like, now what? And now is when the now what happens, right? There's all these different options, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you're not you've been through it, and I thought maybe you could shine some light there. And there's many paths. I guess that's the thing that I just say, because I mean, you want to keep up with the Joneses for those listening right now. You know, like you do see other players doing these other things, and you want to be a part of it. Just keep your nose down and keep going. You know, like if you love it, play. You know,
and you have to be ready for it too. Like I said, and you said your son's a good little player. My boys were both pretty good players, you know, in the top of their age group. So that decision, or that helped make the decision easier. Like if you're not, there's no point chasing it if you're not ready for that, and if you don't feel like you're going to be one of the top players and get the most out of the experience. It's okay to stay back and just continue to develop. And you know, there's extra stuff you can do. There's extra skill stuff that you can do, you know, to try and catch up. So it's not, you know, just to keep up just because you feel you have to, because you're going into your draft year, you know, it's not for everybody, for sure.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that you won't ever make it.
Right. That's a great point too. And actually, I've had that discussion with parents. Like if you actually, if the finances, and for vast majority of people, it is a big consideration, but like, you know, let's just say the academy is 25K just for round numbers. And let's just say a minor hockey experience is 10. Let's say you took $5,000 extra and put that just into personal, private player development. You mean, you're getting a pretty darn good experience there on your own, right?
And it's out there. There's options for sure.
Yeah, there's options for sure. So sometimes there could be a good hybrid approach that might be nice at the younger ages too.
Yeah.
We're running up on time, and I told you this was going to happen, but I want to talk about the scout scenario. So like, you've been scouting now for a while. I know there's a lot of listeners here that, you know, have aspirations to get drafted or to be an NHL player. The way the game's going now, like how does it work for you? You enter a rink, like maybe just walk through what being a scout is and how you evaluate a player. Because I know when I first saw my first evaluation form, like I had no idea what scouts were looking at, you know, and how they break you down. So maybe you can shine a little light on that.
Well, and the interesting thing about it is it's so objective too, right? Like you and I, we could be working for the same organization. And that's the great thing about it, is we could go watch a game and watch the same player and come away with two different kind of opinions, you know, how he played, what his skating was like, you know, and then that's what you do. You debate it and you sort of hash it out, and then you figure out what you think that guy is. And then I think the thing in scouting too is you're always, like you said, trying to project what's the ceiling. You know, when we're looking at kids for the NHL draft, we're always saying, okay, the first rounders are the first rounders. They're the best of the group, the cream of the crop. And so they're easier to figure out than the rest of them. You're trying to project what could he be as an NHL player, right? So that's what we're trying to figure out. And so much is a part of it now. Like the game has obviously evolved. Skating is a huge factor. But it's hard. It's hard. Like I'll tell you a perfect example is Mark Stone. When Mark Stone was 17, he played for the Brandon Wheat Kings. He looked like he had his skates on the wrong feet. Like it was really, really bad. And he went in the 6th round, and he's a superstar in the NHL, you know, like, so you never can tell, like, as much as we say, oh yeah, he's not a great skater. He's not. Braden Point, perfect example. He went in the 3rd round because he was small and he wasn't an elite skater for a small player. So it got better. So it's hard. So we're looking at all kinds of different things. Skill level is obviously a part of it. Compete is a huge part of it. You're not going to play in the NHL if you're not super competitive.
Can I stop you on that one? That's a great one. And that's something that I talk about a lot with the people that I work with, and even the program that I created is that competitive spirit is the name that I wrote. But like sometimes players have a hard time really understanding what that like, what is that, right? I mean, like, what does that look like on the ice, or maybe even off the ice, or maybe even in their personality, like away from the rink? Like, what do you, when you say that word and you're watching for it, what does that look like?
Well, I guess it's just a desire I guess deep down it's a desire to win, right? So what is that? So compete for every player is going to look a little bit different. If you're a big, heavy winger that's a crasher and a banger, then that's what you're going to do, and we're going to see that. And you're going to go to the hard areas. You're going to finish all your checks. But if you're a small, skilled guy, and that's not your game, well, how easily are you knocked off the puck? How easily are you pushed to the outside, or how determined are you to get to the inside, to play in the hard areas, to get your scoring opportunities? Those are different ways of looking at compete. That's the way my take on it is, for sure. Yeah. So it's something, it's not that you can pinpoint it exactly, but it's a willingness and a desire to do whatever you can in that situation. Puck battles, physical play, doing what you can to look like you're doing everything you can with your abilities.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's a great way of putting it, because a guy like, I don't know why Panarin comes to mind. He just does to me right now. Like he doesn't intimidate anyone physically. He obviously has great skill set, but you watch how many times he takes the puck off somebody in the corner.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Like his compete level there and his stick lifting and his ability to,
determination.
Yeah. Like he has that compete level. Like, to me, he has a high amount of competitive spirit, right, in his own way.
Yeah.
And that manifests different in different players. And that's part of that identity thing I think we were talking about earlier, right? Like, everyone's different. What type of player are you, knowing that, and how do you show that compete within the confines of what you are?
Exactly.
Because the intangibles is what players just don't get, I think. Like, everyone's so production focused, and they don't realize that you're watching a defenseman, like, their exits. I assume you watch a player's exits, right? Now they're using analytics on that. I mean, how does the puck get out of the zone after he touches the puck, or when he gives the puck to somebody else? Can that person do something with the puck at that point, right?
Exactly.
People don't usually think like that. I mean, the 17-year-old defenseman probably doesn't analyze their game and on their exits, but that's like a huge factor at the pro game.
Yeah, absolutely. I coached Luke Shen in Kelowna, and he was, back then when he was in his draft year, you could tell what type of player he was going to be at the NHL level, exactly what he's turned into: a hard, rugged, stay-at-home, shutdown type of player. He was obsessed with his points. Like, every day he'd come in and worry about he wasn't getting enough points, because if he was worried about that part of his game for the draft. And we were getting frustrated, to be honest with you. Like, Luke, like, the team that drafts you isn't drafting you to run their power play. So be great at what you're good at, and he went right to the NHL. So when he was 19, so he figured it out. But you're exactly right. Everyone's so focused on production and not realizing there's so much more to the game, especially for different players. Like, it takes all kinds of players to make up a team, right?
Yeah. The pieces to the puzzle.
Yeah.
Scott Nickel famously said on this program, he goes, "You can't have 20 milk drinkers."
Yeah, exactly.
I love that one. He's like, you need some personality. And he was talking about, obviously, the different components of a team that make it a team, right? So did you did say earlier that you find it harder to find guys that want to, play hard, I guess, or compete, for lack of a better word, in the more traditional kind of hockey sense. Are those players becoming, are you looking for those players more actively now? Like, somebody that can fill that third line role, that wants to play mean and big?
Yeah, I think they probably get pushed up your list, for sure, because they are harder to find. And when you see them play like that consistently, especially when they're 17, then you think, wow, that's a guy that I'd like to get my hands on, because like I said, it's an element of the game that's harder to find in young kids, for sure. I think, back when you and I played, we probably got pushed a little bit harder to play that way, and everyone, sort of, and then either you did or you didn't, and you fell by the wayside. But now kids don't get pushed to play that way. So when you find it, when it looks like it's natural for a kid, he's got a bit of an edge to him. He's got a little FU in his game. And for sure, it's a quality or a skill set that we value, definitely.
Right. Yeah, the way when I'm talking to players now, why I think it's like even more valued is because it has a bigger impact too, like on the other team.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
they're harder to find, but it also, you can impose your will quite a bit easier now. And some of these skill guys, if you want to call them skill guys, right, you make their
Yeah.
life a little bit harder, and it makes it
Yeah.
easier for them to go away.
Yeah, for sure. And there's not as much fighting. There's not as much accountability. So there still is intimidation in the game, like you say. So if you can play that way, and really you don't have to look over your shoulder, like who's going to make me answer the bell, it's a big factor for sure.
Is there any type of top-down approach? Like, so you're with the Jets right now. Does the GM say, like, say the new GM comes in and says, "Hey, we want our team to look like this"? Like, I don't know. Like, I'm just using an example. Like, everyone has to skate. That's the number one thing I want. I want all of our prospects to be able to skate. Like, is there any type of like top-down approach for like a philosophy for the type of player you're looking for?
I haven't seen it with the Jets as much. Kevin Cheveldayoff stays out of it. Just kind of lets the guys do their thing. I was with Ken Holland for 10 years in Detroit. He was more about compete and can you win with them? He was all about, maybe you like this guy. He's a nice player. He might show up in the NHL one day. Can you win with him? Does he have what it takes to win a cup? So there was more of that mandate, I would say, from Ken than I've seen so far in Winnipeg from Chevy as much. But having said that, we still discuss it all the time, amongst our staff when we're evaluating players and we're trying to put our list together. We like this player, but, is this a guy you'd rather play with or play against? So that's the way we put it.
That's a great line. I think Tyler Wright said that exact same thing. Who was a Ken Holland guy. That must have been said in the room a little bit there. I love that line. Yeah, because like some teams have an identity. I just kind of wondered that now, like from being a part of it, and now like from the outside seeing how teams are created and manufactured, right? Like there's there's a culture around some teams. It looks like they kind of look for a certain type of player to facilitate that organizational kind of trait, if for lack of a better word,
Right. I think with us, you're looking, especially in the first round, you don't want to miss. You want to find, you put your list together, not positionally, just the best player that you think, who's got the most upside for whatever they're going to be as a player. And that's in the first round. And then after that, you're just kind of just trying to figure out, without an actual mandate, like we want fast, or we want heavy players, or, it's just sort of just taking the best available and the guys that you think have a chance to become some sort of an NHL player in some capacity down the road.
Is there ever a transition between like the physical skill set and the personal makeup? Like, I mean, for lack of a better word, maybe the character. I know you guys get involved in that, and you want to know the person and the history of the person and kind of what they're all about. But does that, in my mind, like I see like somebody who's like super talented, sometimes you will overlook a few of the warts maybe when it comes to one side, right? But then I would suspect that as you kind of go down the spectrum, on the talent spectrum, now you're really looking for those character, good, human pieces that they're going to bring that to the table. Like, how do you do those intangibles as a scout?
Yeah, that's definitely a part of it. It's hard to know, right? These kids are young and they're 17 and they're still trying to figure it out themselves. They got so many different things, influences in their lives, so there's an element of luck to it for sure. I know you had Dennis Holland on here before. I don't know, did he talk about Jamie Benn? Like, if everyone thought Jamie Benn was going to be what Jamie Benn turned out to be, he would have got drafted a lot higher than the 5th round, right? So there's an element of luck for sure. I would say we do a little bit more research now than maybe we did when I first started. You're trying to find out as much about the kid's makeup as you can. And again, you interview them, you talk to them, you try and get a feel for them. Is there a fire there? Are they going to push through? They got things, like you said, they got warts, they got to get stronger. Are they committed to the off ice stuff? So it's all stuff that you try and gather as much information as you can and make the best decision that you can. And at the end of the day, like, what is after I don't know what the numbers are, but it's very minimal that end up playing after the second round. So it's a tough job. It's tough.
Yeah. No, yeah, success rate is low, and that's the main
Yeah.
thing. If you can change the percentages a fraction, right? Like to
Yeah.
find
Yeah.
some type of a secret sauce. I assume you're talking to the coaches a lot. Is that one of your resources? You build some relationships because I mean they're with them every day, right? And if you want to know
Yeah.
about the person, I think that's probably the guy you'd want to talk to. And when I mean the person, I mean like you see the player on the ice. There's also elements that you're going to see the person show up. Maybe in adversity, maybe after a bad call, maybe after a teammate misses them with a pass. You'll see some of these
Yeah.
personality traits, but a coach that's with them, 200 days a year probably has more opportunity to see that. Is that a phone call you make to ask those questions?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, like you said, you try and build relationships with the coaches, even assistant coaches. There's guys that I know better that are assistant coaches where I guess the point I'm trying to get is you want to get the real scoop. You don't want to get the, sort of the glossed over because the coach doesn't want to throw his own player under the bus and not get him drafted.
Yeah.
But an ex-teammate of yours that's going to say, "Hey, Finner, be careful with this guy." You're trying to get the real scoop from people that you have the closest relationship with for sure. So, but yeah, it's definitely a part of it. General managers, even scouts, guys that knew these kids when they were 14. I run into those guys at the arenas all the time, and I'll say, "Hey, what was this kid like when you guys drafted him back then?" and stuff like that. So, yeah, you try and find as much people who you trust and are going to give you the straight goods for sure.
Right. I always encourage players to build those relationships with the coaches, and not in a not in a phony, fabricated way, but like you want them to be your biggest fans.
That's
Like
right.
you
Yeah.
you want them to know, because that's where a lot of these things are going. Maybe my last question, and just for the players who are listening, I know a lot of scouts have reverted or even mandated by their teams to watch a lot of video on players now. You can definitely cover a lot of ground in a short period of time and not be on the road. But I know there's a lot of scouts that love watching the games live because the camera doesn't cover what they want to watch. Stuff
Yeah.
behind the play, or
Yeah.
what's he like on a bench, like that type of stuff. Can you maybe, I don't know how important it is or isn't to you, but just for the players watching who most of are focused on the goals and assists and whether the toe drag was nice, like let them know like what you are potentially looking at in a game that's outside of when they have the puck in their stick.
Well, we are looking at all those little details that you talked about away from the game. One, like you mentioned, body language. How do they react to adverse situations during the game? Just different details, the way they play within, sort of a team structure. Do they cheat? Are they leaving the zone early? Are they the last guy come out of the offensive zone? Just little things like that, yeah, you wouldn't pick up on a video. I like video as a support tool. I think it's hard when you go in blind, not knowing a player, and you're getting some, not great quality video, and you're trying to figure out, what is his skating really like? It's hard to tell. It's hard to tell even how big they are on the video. But if you know a player, you feel like you know him really well, and you want to go back and watch some of his clips and see, how you saw that he had a couple goals last night. Let's go watch and see how he scored those goals,
Right.
So stuff like that. I think it's a great support tool, but I think, excuse me, there's no substitute for watching a game live and watching all the little things. I mean, I guess that's part of why scouts got the job, is because they have some sort of hockey background where they should be able to pick out little details that maybe their trained eye couldn't, that someone else couldn't pick up. Right. And
Right.
things, that characteristics of a player that maybe would give them an advantage or a disadvantage.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's great stuff. And I think that would be, I mean, for the home runs that you do hit from time to time, the Jamie Benns in the 5th round, and like those players are really the players that changed the organizational.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Because they're not expected, and you can get those guys in there that can contribute. That somebody saw something, right, that other people didn't, and I think that would be that's the fun. I think. I would suspect for you, right?
Yeah.
It's like really trying to find those gems, right? Because I can walk into a rink, and I've said this before, and my wife can walk into a rink, and we both know who Connor McDavid is in 2 seconds.
Yep. Exactly.
That's not hard to see, right? But it's like, how do we find who those other guys are?
Right. I think another big part of what's become a big part of the game in organizations, they all do it a little bit differently, but player development after you've drafted them. And so I see it with, we talked about my older son, Jack, in Tampa. They've sent out Barb Underhill to work with his skating. She gets credited for changing Braden Point's skating. They have functional movement people that come out to see him and visit him and work with them and stuff. So that's a big part of helping out now too, is the player development team within the organization too, and help players get better and be the best they can be.
Yeah, well, they have to now, right? With the
Yeah.
salary cap and everything. If you don't have people coming out on entry-level deals playing on your big club, you just can't compete.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it's really transitioned that way, which helps these young guys a lot because they do get a ton of resources and a
Yeah.
ton of hand holding when it comes to getting their game better. Do you have any type of because you see these guys, right? I mean, I could imagine like you're almost like, and maybe your guy gets picked and you're rooting for him, and then you kind of do hand them off to the player development people, and you got to go back and watch the next crop of kids. Are scouts ever involved in that player development process? Like what you saw, or you asked what you saw, or what you project they could be, or is there any type of back and forth when it comes to that?
Yeah, a little bit. Surprisingly, not as much as you would think. But yeah, it's definitely a part of it. It's the problem is it's such a long process. Like you draft a kid, he's not going to show up for 5 years really before he really might have a chance to maybe get his foot in the door, but not even be an impactful player. So
Right.
it's such a long route to get there. So you just hope that you find more good ones than bad ones. I guess that's all you can say.
Yeah.
And you hit on the odd late guy.
Yeah, well, it takes a village, right? In that scenario, and you've said it
Yeah.
before. I mean, you might see something and it takes, that player needs to progress and develop, and hopefully that he's getting some support in that. And then he probably needs to find a coach that likes him and wants to promote him and give him opportunity. And there's a lot of things that got to go right. And you and I both know that from a personal level, right?
Yeah.
You could do a good job from a coaching standpoint, but there can be a lot of, not from a scouting standpoint, there can be a lot of things that happen between then and, whatever his opportunity is or isn't. But anyways, I don't want to keep you. It's been an hour and 15, so I will let you go. Could probably talk hockey all afternoon. It's there's so much to talk about, but really appreciate Finner you coming out. If there was one last word of advice for anyone who wants to try and get drafted and impress the likes of someone like you, is there anything you want to leave them with?
Oh boy, I don't know. I guess just love the game. Play like you love it. Play with passion and compete. And it shows. It shows when we watch a game, and we watch kids time and time and time again. Like you're being evaluated over the course of the entire season, and actually over the course of 3 years. For kids that are in junior, like if you don't get drafted when you're 17, we're drafting kids when they're 19 all the time. So don't be discouraged by it. Play because you love it. And it'll show up, and hopefully it works out for you. But yeah,
I think that is the biggest thing is finding joy coming to the rink. Enjoying that, because it makes all the other BS manageable, right? Like, and that's one of the things I talk about with the players too. Is like your son, for instance, being finding some type of passion in that fourth line role, like something that he looks forward to coming there. Like that's a skill, because you got to get through it, right? You got to get through it. And if you only love hockey because you're on the PP scoring 50 goals, that's not going to last very long, probably.
No, we've had some difficult conversations. He's down, and rightfully so. He's never gone through this in his hockey career. So he's battling through it, and he's trying to stay as positive as he can. And I give him credit because he plays hard in the limited role that he plays. He's added some elements to his game. You can tell he's learned to play with some structure, and he's battling along the walls and protecting the puck and doing a lot of things. So you can tell he's being taught and he's learning. And he's trying to apply them as best he can, but it's discouraging, right? When you think you're doing everything that you can, and you played well, but you're out of the lineup tomorrow. So it's
you
hard
got to show up again the next day, right? Just like playing in Binghamton or playing.
Like to your point, if you don't love it, and have passion for it, it's hard to battle through those moments.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks again for your time. You've been a fantastic guest. There was a lot of gold nuggets there for the players and parents listening. So appreciate that, Finner, and our paths will cross again soon, I'm sure.
Absolutely. At a minor hockey rink, it sounds like.
Yeah, it sounds good. Cheers.
Okay, bud. Take care.
Thank you for sticking around to the end, faithful audience, faithful listener. I thought that conversation was just fantastic. What wide range of topics we could cover because of Jeff's own personal involvement in the sport. I mean, from all different angles, whether it be a personal experience of his as a player, going through the junior ranks and the AHL pro system and becoming a solid 700 game NHLer, or be as a parent who is now trying to support, like the rest of us, his own players' journeys and child's journeys throughout the junior ranks to try and get the development needed and try and give them the opportunities they can to become the players that they want to and make their dreams come true. And also his involvement as a amateur scout for an NHL team, trying to identify talent and evaluate talent and project talent, and what he looks for in that. So what a great guest. Really thankful that you were able to listen to all the nuggets, and grateful for you, Jeff, if you are listening, for being able to share all that insider information. My big takeaways today were one, Jeff's ability to be mature enough to evolve his game to allow himself the opportunity to become an NHL regular. This is not an easy thing for a lot of us to do. And I'm not encouraging youth athletes to do this, because we want to keep, the projections high and the bar high, and I want us to strive for more and become more. But there is going to be moments in time where a role will be decreased or diminished, or you're going to be asked to do something that you feel isn't something maybe you even want to do. It might be something that you feel is beneath you, for lack of a better word. But being able to find passion and being able to find pride in that thing. And for Jeff, it was becoming a stay-at-home, dependable defenseman. And that ability to change and that ability for him to embrace that and to become that allowed him to play 700 games in the NHL. If he didn't make that decision, and if he tried to continue to be the offensive guy and didn't take care of his own end, he would have continued to be the up and down guy that would have been a good player in the minor leagues, but would have never got this chance to establish himself at the NHL level. So we have to be willing to grow, and we have to be willing to adapt. And sometimes that growth is really being able to embrace something that doesn't feel like growth, which is taking on a role that isn't a production role, but is filling the need for the team that you are on. That is one thing that I do talk about with junior players, especially when they do make the jump to junior, for you junior players out there who are listening or who are trying to get to junior. When you level up, you are often not in the role that you want to be. You might want to be a power play guy. You might want to be the guy who's looked upon to score the big goal in the big moment, because most of the players that go to the junior levels were that player for their club team at home. So transitioning to somebody who's in and out of the lineup, or transitioning to somebody who's maybe taking a PK responsibility or really just needs to be dependable on their own end, that is okay. There is nothing wrong with owning that role for that particular year and trying to do that to the best of your ability. That doesn't mean you don't want to strive to get more minutes, that you don't want to strive to become a power play guy. But in that moment, if you're given the opportunity to own some type of a role, if you're given the opportunity to own a piece of that team and be a piece of that puzzle, just do it. It doesn't mean that that's what you're going to be next year. A lot of times this is the road to have greater impact, to have a greater responsibility. And I see players all the time get in their own way because they're frustrated with the role that they've been given. If you can keep a good attitude, and if you can keep your eyes on the prize and just embrace what it is that's being asked of you, and do it with deliberateness, and do it with conviction, and do it with a smile on your face, you're not only growing the roots of your foundation for the rest of your hockey career, you're not only building your resiliency and your adaptability, but you're also earning trust from your coaches and from your teammates. And that trust is something that takes a while to earn, and you will be given greater responsibility. That's just the way it goes. Sometimes we don't see it though, because the path or the runway is a lot longer than players see sometimes. We can only see what's right in front of us and what's happening right now. So keep that in mind. I think that's a great lesson from this episode, is that we can grow. We can definitely grow, and we want to grow, but we need to own where we're at right now in order for that growth to happen. So that's all I got for you today. Thanks again for listening to the end, and until next time, play hard and keep your head up.